Tonight, a political union. The government strikes a deal with the coalition to force the CFMEU into administration. Yorma, good evening. I'm James Glenday, coming to you from Ngunnawal country, and we acknowledge others with connection to the lands of the ACT. This is ABC News. Also tonight, last-ditch talks underway to broker a Gaza ceasefire and hostage release deal. ACT Labor unveils what it calls a $20 million renewal package for Tuggeranong. And happy as Larry, TV veteran Larry Emder takes home the gold logo. The scandal-plagued CFMEU will be forced into administration after the federal government struck a deal with the coalition, bowing to several of its demands. The construction union has been in turmoil amid allegations of corruption and bikie infiltration. Stephanie Dalzell reports.
Senator Watt's party...
Stalling, haggling and arm wrestling.
They spent the best part of 3 days curling up into a little ball.
Tell me when you're ready. Political tactics.
The bill that was tabled by the minister in the parliament 4 sitting days to go looked like, quite frankly, it could have been drafted by John Setka.
Proceed a parliamentary deal.
We are now in a position to provide passage of that bill.
On the back of allegations the union's been infiltrated by organised crime, the federal government's pushing new laws to force it into administration. It's now secured the coalition's support by agreeing to a minimum 3-year period of administration, additional parliamentary scrutiny, potential life bans for officials, and the blocking of union money to political parties.
The time for corruption, criminality, violence and bikies in Australia's construction union and the industry is coming to an end.
There'll be a greater transparency, and for us that means that the business that you're doing should be a lot more predictable, and for those that have been suffering bullying and intimidation, that's finished.
For the Greens, the legislation's rushed and far-reaching.
Anytime the Coalition and Labor join together to do one of these kinds of attacks, I think warning bells should go off.
The CFMEU has labelled this legislation shameful and unnecessary, saying allegations of criminality should be dealt with by a court rather than Parliament. The government secured an early win with this deal, but the construction union is only just beginning its fight back. Stephanie Dalzell, ABC News, Canberra.
The US Secretary of State, Antony Blinken, is meeting Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu as part of a last-ditch effort to broker peace in the Middle East. Secretary Blinken says this could be the decisive moment for a ceasefire and the last opportunity to get Israeli hostages released. But Hamas brushed off US peace hopes, saying any new proposal is biased towards Israel, as renewed airstrikes killed more than 24 Palestinians.
Another day in Gaza brings more missiles from the sky. This Israeli strike in the central part of the Strip killed 5 people. Gaza's Ministry of Health says 29 Palestinians have been killed in the last 24 hours, including young quintuplets. US Secretary of State Antony Blinken has touched down in Israel to push for peace.
This is a decisive moment, probably the best, maybe the last opportunity to get the hostages home, to get a ceasefire.
But the region remains on edge, and the militant group Hamas says it won't accept America's latest proposal for a ceasefire in Gaza. Hamas says the proposal includes new conditions from Israel which it can't accept, such as a continuing Israeli military presence inside Gaza, ongoing Israeli control of the border with Egypt, and no terms for a permanent ceasefire. The group also says Israel's not agreeing to a fair exchange of Palestinian prisoners for Israeli hostages held inside Gaza. Israel says it also won't compromise on elements of the deal, but wants Hamas to face more pressure.
We are holding very complex negotiations in which the other side is a murderous terrorist organisation that is unbridled and obstinate.
Tension is rising. In Tel Aviv, police are investigating whether an explosion that killed one man was a failed suicide bombing.
We still don't know. We're checking everything. It may be an act of terror or a crime. The terrorist option is more likely.
In Gaza, aid groups are calling for an urgent pause in the war to head off a full-blown outbreak of polio. More than 600,000 children need to be vaccinated in the coming weeks.
We're tired of this life we're living. No food, no drink, no medicine. What are we supposed to do?
Without a ceasefire, it could be impossible to prevent another public health catastrophe for Gazans. Eric Twarchek, ABC News, Jerusalem.
Meanwhile, the pro-Palestinian encampment at the Australian National University has ended after 110 days. Students campaigning for the ANU to cut all ties with Israel cited a partial win last week when the university announced it would stop investing in some weapons manufacturers. The group says that development, coupled with safety issues arising from a lack of electricity at the camp, made them rethink their position. They say they'll continue pushing for further changes at the university, but using different methods.
This movement isn't necessarily about a camp, it is about achieving divestment and cutting ties with Israel. So it's been continuous discussions the whole 110 days about what the best use of our time and what the best strategy is. It was, we made the decision in the last week that now was the time to change those strategies.
ACT Labor has announced what it calls a $20 million renewal package for Tuggeranong ahead of October's territory election. The money would fund upgrades to playgrounds, footpaths and local shops. Labor's broader plan for the district also includes measures it has previously announced, such as a health centre for the Lanyon Valley and measures to clean up Lake Tuggeranong. That has prompted criticism from the Canberra Liberals, who say the government has neglected the area for years, but the Chief Minister has defended Labor's efforts and flagged that similar policies will be released for each of Canberra's regions.
These are the priorities that were identified by our candidates through their engagement with the local community. In any 4-year term, there is only so much that can be delivered.
The people of Tuggeranong have run out of patience, and so I give them no credit for not fulfilling promises that they've already made, and that's only on them. If you can't fulfil a promise, well then don't make it.
Brittany Higgins' legal team has told a court she will not be called to give evidence in her own defence in the defamation case brought by Liberal Senator Linda Reynolds. Ms Higgins' lawyer, Rachel Young, has told the Western Australian Supreme Court she did not think she needed to call her to win the case. Ms Young also mentioned that her client's medical state affected the decision. Senator Reynolds' defamation action centres around social media posts by Ms Higgins, which she claims damaged her reputation and caused her distress. Ms Higgins was expected to give evidence next week. Ms Higgins' defence in the defamation trial relies in part on the truth defence, claiming Senator Reynolds mishandled the rape allegation and did not fully support her. Well, an increase in extreme weather events is driving higher home insurance costs, according to a new report by the Insurance Council of Australia. The Insurance Catastrophe Resilience Report is warning that the impacts these events are having on the economy has more than tripled over the past 3 decades.
This is the place Tammy Fogarty now calls home after a freak storm flattened her house last Christmas.
It basically just ripped the roof off my house and flipped my front veranda into my lounge room.
Her insurance is covering the cost of the rental while her house in the Gold Coast hinterland is rebuilt.
The cash settlement that I've been offered will be covering all of that, plus the rent in the house I'm in at the moment.
A report from the Insurance Council of Australia has found stories of extreme weather like Tammy's are driving up the cost of home insurance. More than 150,000 claims were made in the past financial year, nearly 75% more than the previous year. Premiums are already rising, but they're not keeping pace with payouts, which have tripled over 3 decades. And floods are having the biggest impact.
Flooding is our number one issue in Australia, and the reason for that is we know that there's around 220,000 homes approximately that were built in a 1 in 20 flood zone, or a 5% chance that they will flood every year.
Christmas storms in Victoria, New South Wales and on the Gold Coast that saw flooding inundate homes and businesses were the costliest events last financial year, resulting in $1.3 billion in claims.
We've got to get back to the core of what we're dealing with here, and that is an ageing stock of homes in this country built in some of the wrong locations that we can do a better job of protecting into the future.
Tammy just hopes her insurance company helps her.
They've been really good so far. They have been very proactive in getting things done. So, yeah, I'm hoping that the premium doesn't go up too much.
Rachel Clayton, ABC News.
Overseas now, and the Ukrainian army has blown up a second bridge in Russia's Kursk region. It has released footage of this airstrike, saying it is trying to hinder Russian forces from resupplying. The bridge is north of another crossing that Ukrainian soldiers destroyed on Friday. Nearly 2 weeks after it invaded Russia, there are some indications the Ukrainian army may try to hold the land it seized. President Volodymyr Zelensky says Kyiv is aiming to create a buffer region on Russian soil as it seeks to inflict further losses on Moscow. A powerful earthquake in Russia's Far East has set off one of the world's most active volcanoes, which has begun belching smoke and ash nearly 5 kilometres into the sky. The 7-magnitude quake was felt by residents on the eastern side of Russia's remote Kamchatka Peninsula. Aftershocks continue to shake the region, and experts are worried an even more powerful tremor could follow. Now, Kamala Harris is preparing to accept the Democratic presidential nomination at the party's convention this week. Ahead of the 4-day event in Chicago, Ms. Harris and her running mate, Tim Walz, have been touring the crucial swing state of Pennsylvania by bus. The vice president is narrowly ahead of Donald Trump in what is considered a must-win race in the race for the White House. In a stump speech, Harris appeared to suggest that her opponent was a coward whose politics focused on putting down rivals. The Democratic convention kicks off tomorrow, with President Joe Biden expected to be among the speakers on day one. Well, he declared himself television's most axed man, but now Channel 7's Larry Emdur is feeling the love after winning the industry's top award, the Gold Logie. The ABC also collected several gongs, and one Aussie who became a global TV sensation at the Olympics also made a special appearance.
And the Gold Logie goes to Larry Emdur.
The highest honour in Australian TV after 40 years in the business.
To my late dad, who on my very first day going to the Channel 7 newsroom as a cub reporter, I said, "Dad, what do I do in there for my job?" And he goes, "Mate, just be nice to everyone." And I came home after a couple of weeks and Dad said, "How's it going?" I said, "Dad, I'm trying, but there's so many assholes in this business."
Also taking aim at the industry, host Sam Pang roasted the networks in his opening monologue.
Full disclosure, I'm not getting paid by Channel 7 tonight. Instead, for the next 12 months, they're paying my rent.
The other big accolades, actress Rebecca Gibney was inducted into the Hall of Fame.
And I am very proud to be one of only 4 women to ever have been inducted into the Hall of Fame.
There's been a big increase in the focus on streaming this year. Just 5 years ago, there were no nominations for programs broadcast on streaming services. Now they dominate in some categories. Netflix's Boy Swallows Universe cleaned up 5 awards, making for an emotional night for 15-year-old star Felix Cameron.
I'd like to thank my friends, family, my brother and my sister, and my mum and dad.
One of the country's newest stars, Olympic breaker Ray Gunn, also made a surprise appearance.
Please feel free to pull out any of my signature moves in celebration.
The ABC received a record 51 nominations and took home 6 trophies for Utopia, Bluey, Australian Story and Total Control. A long night of fanfare for Australian entertainment. Sean Turrick Goodwin, ABC News, Sydney.
Coming up later this hour on 7:30 with Sarah Ferguson, the aged care homes failing safety and care standards but scoring a 5-star government rating.
The systems that have been put into place to provide transparency to the general public are giving a deceptive picture.
Who do I turn to? Who will listen?
It's like a madhouse here. Please help me. Lots of love, Mum.
5-star. I don't know how you can possibly come up with that.
For many kids, problems with language and literacy often don't show up until they start learning to read, but an innovative screening tool developed in the UK can be used on children under 5 to identify language disorders early. It's being trialled at schools across Tasmania in the hope that early intervention will lead to better literacy outcomes.
These kinder kids have big plans for the future.
I want to be a policeman, a basketballer, Spider-Man. I think I want to be Batman.
They're just starting out on their educational journey.
I like reading.
But before they really get into learning letters, they're being screened to see whether they may be at risk of reading difficulties.
This is a grey cat.
This is a grey cat.
You did it. I think you're clever.
The Grammar and Phonology Screen, or GAPS, is being trialled at schools in Tasmania. Children are asked to repeat simple sentences and made-up words.
Defrimple.
It helps identify any issues with language.
It's non-confrontational, it's so easy and so relaxed, it's just lovely.
1 in 14 children have a developmental language disorder, which is a difficulty understanding and using language. It can't be identified just by hearing a child speak, but this screening tool can pick it up.
It's raising those red flags really early. It's a really big marker for their future literacy because literacy completely depends on language ability.
If an issue is identified, parents, teachers and sometimes speech pathologists can work with a child to expand vocabulary and language.
For example, when we're getting dinner ready and we're sitting eating dinner, it can be as simple as looking at the vegetables and talking about them and bringing in words like crunchy and juicy.
I think it's great for parents so they can get on top of the problem, and good for the child as well, basically so they don't feel behind.
I'm very happy that they're doing it at this age because I struggled a lot in school.
Tackling literacy issues early means opening the door to future opportunities.
Should I go and play now?
Fiona Blackwood, ABC News.
As more cars are powered by electricity and not fossil fuels, some questions are being asked about the effect EVs are having on the electrical grid. Here's National Energy reporter Daniel Mercer.
Life in the fast lane. Like a growing number of Australians, Peter Petrovsky drives an electric vehicle, or EV. One of the biggest attractions? Performance.
You can't compete with that sort of instant torque.
But there's a much bigger electric machine that's increasingly occupying the minds of energy experts. With Australia on the cusp of an electric vehicle revolution, the ability of the power grid to cope is an open question.
Yes, EVs will have an effect on the grid, but I actually think that effect could be positive if it's managed well.
EVs accounted for close to 10% of all new cars sold in Australia in the first quarter of this year, up from just 4% in 2022. It's a trend that's only expected to gather pace as the federal government targets sales of 50% by 2030.
I don't think anyone disagrees with the notion that the long-term future is electric. At best, hybrid.
One of the little appreciated aspects of EVs is their sheer size as electrical appliances. Compared with most other devices, they are huge. And while that might not be a problem when they're being charged slowly, fast charging them can add significantly to a household's demand for power.
Boiling a kettle will use about the same amount of energy as an EV plugged into a standard outlet. But for the average customer that has a wall-mounted charger, they'll be adding about 50% demand to the network.
Poles and wires companies are adamant the grid can handle the extra demand, saying the vehicles could even help make the system more efficient.
Your electric vehicle would be plugged into your charger, and it would enable energy from that battery to be discharged or flow into the network at a time when the network really needed it.
Everyone agrees that getting the settings right will be crucial.
You can future-proof sometimes the networks by taking overhead lines, the poles and wires you might see outside your house, and burying them underground with new cables. And those new cables are bigger, typically, so they can carry more juice, more electricity.
Peter Petrovsky is backing Australia to navigate any bends in the road ahead.
I'm very optimistic. I don't think EVs will present a problem for the grid as long as they're managed responsibly.
Charging a revolution, one trip at a time. Daniel Mercer, ABC News. Booktopia will resume online sales this week after the failed retailer was rescued by a buyer. Its new owner, electronics chain DigiDirect, has committed to honouring all gift cards issued within the past 12 months. However, it can't refund customers who've been waiting for unsent orders or send out their books.
We will be guiding those customers towards their credit card providers where they can to try and get what they can from those providers and work with them as best as we can.
To finance now, and Treasury is warning the tumbling iron ore price could see government income drop by $3 billion. Here's Alan Kohler.
Treasurer Jim Chalmers issued a statement last night with Treasury's analysis of the iron ore market, pointing out that the price of Australia's largest export was now $81.80 US a tonne, below the price the Treasury had assumed for the budget, which was $83. Now, I must confess to being rather confused by this because when I look on Bloomberg, the iron ore spot price is $92.85. The answer is that Treasury's assumed price is FOB. That is, it doesn't include freight. Everyone else quotes CFR, which does include it. Now, these are the two lines on the graph, FOB and CFR, with Treasury's assumption as a green dotted line. Now, I suppose the main reason for yesterday's statement, apart from warning us that tax receipts will be short $3 billion, and don't blame us, was to show that they got it right and that it's not a hollow log after all. The iron ore miners and their shareholders will be hoping the Treasury is not right about what happens next, which is that it keeps falling to $60 US a tonne. FOB, of course, which means an actual CFR spot price of about $70. So as discussed, the iron ore price fell to a new two-year low of $92.85 over the weekend, but the big one on commodity markets is gold, up 2% to a new all-time record high above $2,500 US an ounce. The iron ore miners all fell, but the market closed with a small rise. It's seventh in a row, which is the longest winning streak since 8 in a row in January. A2 Milk dropped almost 20% after missing profit expectations, while software firm Nuix jumped 25% after beating them. The US market bounced back from a fall on Friday, and the Aussie dollar went up against the US dollar but fell against the yen and the Kiwi. And that's finance.
To sport now, and in the NRL, Penrith superstar Nathan Cleary is hoping to be fit for the finals, but will miss his team's match against the Canberra Raiders this weekend. Panthers fans were left disappointed on Friday night as the halfback left the field with a shoulder injury in the side's narrow loss to the Storm. It was a recurrence of the shoulder issue he suffered earlier in the season. Brad Schneider or Jack Cole will replace him for Saturday's match against Canberra, but the club is confident that Cleary will be part of a push for a fourth straight premiership.
Oh, after the game, he was pretty gutted, but he's in there ripping in on his rehab already. So he's in good spirits, and he probably just can't wait to get back.
In the AFL, Port Adelaide's Dan Houston looks set for a lengthy stint on the sidelines after his brutal hit on an Adelaide Crows player was sent directly to the tribunal. Online racial abuse on Port's Willie Rioli has also marred what should have been a sweet showdown victory for the Power.
Another horrific example of online racial abuse, again directed at Port Adelaide's Willie Rioli.
It's not a great look. as a society, it's not a great look.
This tweet surfacing after the Powers Showdown win, the second example of racial abuse towards Rioli in the last 2 years.
It's people that obviously, get some sort of kick out of doing it, but the hurt that it causes for people is too much for it to be worth it, in my eyes.
Both clubs have released statements condemning the posts, Port Adelaide saying racism is abhorrent, unacceptable and never welcome, extending their support to Rioli and his family. The Crows say the offender isn't a member of the club and confirm that the incident was referred to the AFL's Integrity Unit. Today's revelations took some of the spotlight off Port defender Dan Houston, who's been sent directly to the tribunal for this bump on Crow Isaac Rankin. Deemed as careless, severe impact and high contact, Houston is likely to spend 3 to 5 weeks off the ground, potentially missing finals football.
Yeah, we know that it's happened before and there's been repercussions for it, so we just got to wait and see what they come down with.
Rankin was absent from training today and is expected to stay at home for another few days before returning to the club.
From all reports, there's no other injuries associated with it, just a concussion, so hopefully he's on the mend and feeling better and in and around the club in the next couple of days.
Rankin wasn't the only one receiving a high blow at the showdown. Port Adelaide confirming its mascot Thunder received a punch from a crowd member, ending up with a blood nose. Adelaide Oval declined to comment, but SA Police say it is aware of the incident. Daniel Litchens, ABC News.
In cycling, Polish rider Kasia Niewiadoma has taken out her first Tour de Femme title. She saw off a strong challenge from the defending champion Demi Vollering to win the race. Vollering won the final stage, but Niewiadoma's fourth place was enough for her to claim the Tour victory by just 4 seconds. Australian Sarah Gigante finished 7th in the overall standings. The newborn foal of Black Caviar has died just a day after the champion racehorse's death. Black Caviar gave birth to the foal on Saturday, shortly before she was euthanised after succumbing to a hoof disease. In a statement, Black Caviar's owners thanked the veterinary team for their efforts in caring for both the champion mare and her colt, which could not be saved. They also thanked the public for the many tributes to Black Caviar. To the weather now, and tonight's viewer photo comes from Ainsley Moorthorpe, who took this of a rain cloud that arrived in Canberra as the sun was setting last night. Thank you for that, Ainsley. And of course, if you have a photo you'd like to share, the address, Canberra Weatherpics at abc.net.au. And you can see from that photos, we did have a few light showers last night, but nothing to get too excited about in the gauge. It's still a bit more humid than usual, and there are some clouds lingering. After a low of 5 this morning, we got to a touch over 16 at the airport this afternoon. Around the region, -5 overnight at Perisher Valley and -7 in Cooma. Maruya reached a top of 16 degrees. In the capitals, Brisbane got to 24, Sydney 19 and Melbourne 17. You can see it was very warm today in Alice Springs, 32 degrees, the top there. On the satellite, the cloud in the south there is the main thing that we're keeping an eye on as it does head our way. It's associated with a cold front and trough that'll enter the west of New South Wales tomorrow and move across our region, probably the ACT, from tomorrow night and into Wednesday. It will first bring some showers to Melbourne tomorrow. Sydney should see a bit of sun, and Brisbane might have some light local showers as well. In our region, it is going to be a real mixed bag, with the cloud building as that front gets closer. 17 or 18 degrees, the likely tops in the major centres on the south coast. A bit of wind is still blowing down there from the sea, cooling things down. It's going to be about -3 degrees overnight in the snowies, but the maximum of 8 at Perisher Valley is not good news at all for snow lovers. About 16 degrees is on the way for Yass and 14 for Goulburn. The current forecast suggests there is a chance of some wet snow or rain for the resorts. Blink and you'll miss it though. Fingers crossed it is actually snow. And there is also a pretty decent chance of some morning fog, which might linger, so please do take care on the roads around the ACT in the morning. It can certainly make things a bit tricky. Here in Canberra, the beating heart of the nation, we are not only going to feel the power, but maybe some showers as well. Most of the day will be partly cloudy. You can see there from the new graphics we have that the forecast says the rain should arrive from sometime late tomorrow afternoon or evening. Our model, when I last checked, seemed to suggest the evening was most likely, but in any case, only a few millimetres of rain are likely. After a low of about 2 or 3, we are headed for 17 or 18 degrees, but it'll feel a few degrees cooler than that anyway, at least. Sunrise is 26 minutes to 7 and sunset is 20 to 6, and looking ahead, the showers are expected to linger into Wednesday morning, and then the rest of the week will be a bit bitsy, a bit of cloud, a bit of sun, maybe the odd very light shower. 17 expected on Wednesday and Thursday. And that is the latest from the Canberra newsroom for this Monday evening. I'm James Glenday. It is always lovely to be with you. Stay with us now for 7:30 with Sarah Ferguson. And until tomorrow, Yarra, good night.